I see it all the time in the media. Examples of states intimidating and extorting their own citizens in an effort to consolidate their power. So today, I want to look at some of the recent examples of this and give you some tools to protect yourself and your neighbors. Next on the Constitution Study.
One thing you have to know wherever you make your stand came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution. We teach the rising generation to be free. I'm glad you could join me. It looks like I'm actually going to be able to get out and about. I've signed up for a couple of homeschool conferences. Not only do I get a chance to go out and meet people, some homeschoolers, people who are actually interested in learning, but I just get to meet people. I'll be teaching a couple of classes of these. I hope you'll check the website, constitutionstudy.com, look at the events page. If I'm coming to an area near you, please do me two things. One, if you can attend, attend. If you're going to be there, or if you think you might want to be there, please, I'd love to meet you there. Second, if you've got something you'd like me to do while I'm there, if I'm traveling to another city, that's a great time maybe to bring me in to talk to a group or just to sit down and have coffee and chat with a bunch of friends. So check the website, constitutionstudy.com/events. If you find something of interest, please contact me and let's see if we can arrange some special time while we're there. I'm also announcing the new Constitution Scholars Program. I'll be talking more about that at the end of the video. But for now, let's talk about this state extortion. You may think I'm being hyperbolic when I describe state actions as extortion. Well, Noah Webster defines extortion as, quote, the act of extorting, the act or practice of wresting anything from a person by force, duress, menaces, authority, or by any undue exercise of power, illegal extraction, illegal compulsion to pay money, or to do some other act. So if we see examples of governments using force, duress, or their authority to wrest something away, well, then they're using extortion. As we go through these examples, keep in mind that under federal law, extortion is punishable under the Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act, or as it's more commonly known, RICO. Quote, as used in this chapter, 1. Racketeering activity means A, any act or threat involving murder, kidnapping, gambling, arson, robbery, bribery, extortion, dealing in obscene matter, or dealing in a controlled substance or listed chemical, as defined in Section 102 of the Controlled Substance Act, which is chargeable under state law and punishable by imprisonment for more than 1 year. B, any act which is indicated under any of the following provisions of Title 18 United States Code, Section 1951, related to interference with commerce, robbery, or extortion. Let's start in New Mexico. From a KOAT report, we read, quote, 2 Albuquerque megachurches have been fined after the state says both violated the public health order with massive unmasked services on Christmas Eve. Both churches face up to a $10,000 fine, $5,000 for violating the public health order limiting houses of worship to 25% of capacity, and another $5,000 for violating the mask mandate. So these 2 churches were fined after it was found they had Christmas Eve services in violation of the governor's order. O Constitution of the state of New Mexico, how doth they violate thee? Let us count the ways. Let's start with emergency orders. You see, the New Mexico Constitution provides specific guidelines on the powers that governments can exercise in an emergency. Quote, in addition to the powers herein enumerated, the legislature shall have all powers necessary to the legislature of a free state, including the power to enact reasonable and appropriate laws to guarantee the continuity and effective operation of state and local governments by providing emergency procedures for use only during periods of disaster emergency. Now, hopefully you notice 2 very important points in the above language. First of all, it's the legislature, not the executive branch, that's granted the power to enact reasonable and appropriate laws. Second, those laws are to guarantee the continuity and effective operations of state and local governments. There's no power granted to the state government to regulate the people during an emergency. And nothing in the New Mexico Constitution authorizes the government to violate that document under any circumstances. But there's more. How about life and liberty? From Article 2, Section 4 of the New Mexico Constitution, we read, quote, All persons are born equally free and have certain natural, inherent, and inalienable rights, among which are the right of enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and of seeking and obtaining safety and happiness. Now, the New Mexico Constitution also guarantees that everyone has the right of both enjoying and defending their life and liberty. The government of the state has no legal authority to deny, limit, or regulate how or where the people exercise their liberty. And lastly, and possibly most obvious, freedom of religion. Again, from Article 2 of the New Mexico Constitution, this time from Section 11. Quote, "Every man shall be free to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience, and no person shall ever be molested or denied any civil or political right or privilege on account of his religious opinion or mode of religious worship." You see, by placing limits specifically on houses of worship, the state not only denied those who attend those services their right to worship according to the dictates of their own conscience, but they are molesting those churches who offered services because the state doesn't like the mode of worship, specifically in-person worship. While the state may not have picked on specific religions, they are denying the civil right to peaceably assemble. Now let's go to New York. From a Gothamist article titled "Cuomo Threatens $1 Million Fine and License Revocation for COVID Vaccine Fraudsters Share." Quote, "As thousands of vaccine doses have arrived in New York, the state has placed strict limits on who can receive them, starting with at-risk healthcare workers, nursing home staff, and residents. Those restrictions have not stopped some people who fall outside of the priority categories from obtaining doses, inflaming tensions at some area hospitals." First of all, the government of the state of New York has decided they know not only if, but when you should get your COVID vaccine. And if you dare to give a vaccine to someone outside of the state's prescribed schedule, it's considered fraud, deceit, deception, trick, artifice by which the right or interest of another is injured. Now, who do you think is better able to determine the actual need of an individual or a community? Is it a doctor working directly with a patient or some government bureaucrat in the state capitol? Forget the question of why the federal government purchased all these vaccines and distributed them to the state governments to get to the people. How must it feel to look into the eyes of a patient who desperately needs the vaccine, only to tell them and their family members that the government said no? The government of the state of New York is telling doctors to violate the Hippocratic Oath. Quote, "I will remember that I do not treat a fever chart, a cancerous growth, but a sick human being whose illness may affect the person's family and economic stability. My responsibility includes these related problems. If I am to care adequately for the sick, I will prevent disease whenever I can, for prevention is preferable to cure." Now, should a doctor put their oath to others above the dictates of the state? And not only does Governor Cuomo threaten to revoke their license, but fine them $1 million as well. From the Gothamist article, quote, "Healthcare providers who fraudulently obtained and distributed the coronavirus vaccine could lose their licenses and face up to $1 million in fines under a new executive order announced Monday by Governor Andrew Cuomo." In other words, if you do not put the needs of the state above the needs of your patients, we will punish you. Now, was this punishment enacted by law? No. It was a simple dictate of the governor. Now let's look at Oregon. I found this article on One News Now titled "Oregon Deli Owner Defiant Fighting for Survival." Quote, "COVID-related lockdowns are making life hard for everybody, but the restaurant industry seems to be the only one taking it on the chin. To stave off having to close their doors for good, some restaurant owners are defying the restrictions. By no means are the problems for restaurants and other small businesses limited to Oregon. In the latest example of comply or else, we see Governor Brown of Oregon ordering restaurants to shut down, most likely under the threat of revoking their business license or violation of some health department code. This is what happens when we allow states to tell us when, where, and how we can do business. Sure, no one wants to eat in a place that isn't clean. However, as so often happens, a state law can quickly be used to punish the very public it was designed to help. Now, these are just a few of the headlines I've pulled from the news lately. The question I'm often asked is, what can we do about it? Well, we start by recognizing a simple fact that seems to have been lost to most Americans. Quote, that all power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. For the advancement of those ends, they have at all times an unalienable and indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as they may think proper. Now, yes, this comes from the Constitution of my adopted state of Tennessee. And yes, most of the states have similar language in their constitutions. More importantly, though, this language expresses the natural right of the people to be in control of their government. Not simply to vote for those who occupy elected office, but to oversee them as well. We should also recognize that governments are created by the authority of the people, that they are instituted for our peace, safety, and happiness, and that governments are servants of the people, not their rulers. After that, we must recognize another simple fact expressed by Alexander Hamilton in Federalist Papers number 78. Quote, there is no position which depends on clearer principles than that every act of a delegated authority, contrary to the tenor of the commission under which it is exercised, is void. Every power of government has been delegated to it by the people. Whenever any government official acts, they do so under a delegated authority. And every time someone assumes an office in government, they are commissioned into that delegated authority either directly by the people or indirectly by the representatives of the people. So when those in government act contrary to the commission of their delegated authority, that act is void, empty, and vacant. It's time the American people recognized this simple fact and stopped voluntarily submitting to the edicts and orders that have no substance. Yes, those in government will try to enforce these empty demands, but just as with the emperor who had no clothes, all it takes is for someone to point out that fact and others to join in for the lie to be exposed. Which leads me to the last and possibly most important thing we can do. John Jay said that by reading and studying the Constitution, not only will the people more easily recognize when their rights are being violated, but they will be better prepared to defend and assert them. I say we must go further. If we want to return the country to the land of the free, then we must become the home of the brave. By that I mean it is not enough to stand up for your rights. You must be willing to stand up for the rights of others as well. For too long, the rights of each of us has been separated and segregated from public support. Sure, individuals have stood up to protect their rights, but how many of us have stood up with them? How many of us nervously sat while watching a mother illegally tased and arrested? How many merely shook our heads while everyone from gym owners to hairdressers fought to keep the businesses they had worked so hard for? How many stood by and watched while some self-appointed enforcer demeaned and degraded people whose only crime was trying to live at liberty? And how many of us support not only governments, but businesses who are actively destroying freedom and liberty in America, simply because it was the cheaper or more convenient option? If we want to know why government extortion not only exists in America, but why it has become so effective, it is because we, the people, have voluntarily submitted to the void and empty rules our employees have created in our name. Now, whether because of fear or apathy, we have let this happen. And since we were not faithful to the work of our founding fathers when the issues were minor and the difficulty small, we now have to decide whether we will stand up when the matter is grave and the penalties may be severe. Everyone seems to be looking for someone to blame for what's going on. We blame government, we blame individuals in government, we blame big tech, big business, we blame everybody. The one thing we don't do is blame ourselves. Big government is big government because we, the people, have not kept our governments in check. We have not used the Constitution of our states and of the United States to rein in our employees when they go beyond the boundaries that we've set for them. We sat back and let it happen. It's our fault. We have done business with those who are destroying freedom and liberty in America. We said, well, it's cheaper or it's easier. We have sold our birthright as Americans for a bowl of pottage, for a meager, thin gruel to make our lives a little easier. Do you want to know why extortion works? It's because we submit. And because when we see someone else being extorted, we submit as well. It's true when the mugger does it. It's true when organized crime does it. It's true when drug cartels do it. And it's true when our governments do it. The only difference between them is our governments work for us. The mugger, the organized crime member, the cartel member, they don't work for the American people. Government does. And it's about time we started reminding them of that fact. If you want to live free, you must stand up and fight for it. We had the chance to do so when it would have been a small fight, an easy thing, and we didn't. Whether you're old enough to have been there when it happened or you're just inheriting the mess that your parents left for you, we didn't deal with these problems when they were small, and now our country is in serious danger. The Constitution is ignored. It is laughed at. The restrictions it places on governments might as well be tissue paper. And every time the people of a state or of the United States allow their employees to break the rules without punishment, they get bolder and bolder and bolder. And we are quickly approaching the point where rights and liberties will not be something you have inherent and inalienable. They'll only be what the government allows you to have. Is that the America you want to live in? Do you want to live in a country where you live at the whim of some government bureaucrat? Now, as I said, I've given you some examples of what you can do. I have some tools that you can help. Obviously, you go to the website, constitutionstudy.com. You've got all the articles, all the videos, find the podcast. You can use them. You can share them. They're all absolutely free. If you want to help support that, you can donate to the website. Those donations go to supporting the website. If, however, you want to learn a bit more, then head over to constitutionscholars.com. That's the new website I've set up for my new program. It is free to join. You can join it and you can use all of the resources that you have available there at no charge. It's not a free trial. There's not a time limit. You go in and you use it, and you can find tools that will help you read and study the Constitution, that will help you teach the rising generation to be free. Our rights, the rights of our children, are at stake here. Will you walk away from your television or your phone or whatever's occupying yourself long enough to take a look around you and say, wait a second, what happened to America? What happened to the idea of the land of the free? Have we truly lost being the home of the brave? Are we truly the land of the serf and the home of the coward? Now, let's face it, most people, they don't have the gumption to stand up. They won't. Will you support the people that do? When you see on the news a local store or a local restaurant that's standing up to tyranny, will you stand with them? Will you do business with them? Will you go out of your way to do business with them? Will you pay a little more to support someone standing for liberty rather than someone taking away your liberty? It's still up to us. The Constitution starts, we the people. It's still up to us. And we have to decide what we're going to do. So I ask you, will you stand? Will you fight for liberty? Or will, as Ronald Reagan say, you'll simply explain to your children and your children's children what it was once like in America when men were free. So whether you found this enlightening or aggravating, I hope you found it useful, and you'll come back here next time for the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand.